Cowboy, take me away from here, the Apache woman begged when she saw him at the market. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon, but the market was already alive with activity. Wooden carts rattled over the dusty streets, their wheels leaving curved tracks in the dirt. Traders shouted their wares, the smell of fresh bread mixed with the tang of leather, and the sound of horses stamping in the stables echoed across the square. Children ran between stalls, laughing, while women carefully examined bolts of cloth and jars of herbs. In the middle of all this noise and movement, a figure moved cautiously, almost as if she were trying to be invisible. Her name was Kaya. She was an Apache woman, strong yet gentle, carrying herself with a quiet dignity that made her stand out among the townspeople. Her long, dark hair was braided neatly down her back, and her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the crowd constantly, though her expression was calm. There was tension in her shoulders, a subtle sign that she had not come to the market for leisure. Every step she took was measured, careful, as if she feared being noticed. Kaya had come to the market for something simple, at least in appearance. Food, some basic supplies, and perhaps a few coins to keep herself going. But beneath the ordinary purpose of her visit lay a deep fear, one that had been growing for weeks. She was not safe here, not from the townsfolk, not from those who had already tried to control her life. The world she had been forced into was small, harsh, and unkind to someone like her. Every glance from strangers, every whispered conversation reminded her that she was watched, judged, and hunted in ways she could hardly escape. As she moved between the stalls, Kaya's gaze flicked to a distant corner of the market. That was when she saw him. He was a cowboy, a tall, broad-shouldered man standing near a stall lined with saddles, ropes, and tools of the trade. The first thing she noticed was the way he carried himself, confident, unhurried, yet always aware of his surroundings. His dark hat shaded his eyes, but she could still feel the intensity of his gaze. There was something about him that made her chest tighten, not fear, but a strange mix of hope and recognition, as if destiny had chosen this moment to intervene. Kaya paused for a heartbeat, her hand tightening around the small bundle of coins and supplies she carried. She had to act. She had no time for hesitation. With careful steps she moved closer, her eyes locked on him. The crowd swirled around her, but her focus was only on the cowboy. "Cowboy? Take me away from here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the market's clamor. The words seemed to hang in the air. The cowboy turned his head slowly, as if sensing her presence before she even spoke. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the noise of the market faded, replaced by the silent understanding of two people who had never met but shared an unspoken connection. He studied her carefully. She was young, but carried herself with a strength that spoke of years of hardship and survival. Her hands, though delicate, were steady, betraying no signs of panic, and yet the desperation in her eyes was clear. It was a plea for help, for escape, for a chance to live beyond the fear that had consumed her life. The cowboy, whose name was Eli, felt a pang of curiosity mixed with caution. He had seen many people in his life, some in need, some in trouble. But there was something different about Kaya, something that made him pause, that made him wonder whether helping her was worth the risk. He had learned over the years that appearances could be deceiving, that not everyone who asked for help could be trusted. But there was an honesty in her gaze that made him reconsider. Kaya did not wait for him to speak. She stepped closer, lowering her voice even further. "Please, I have nowhere else to go. They will not leave me be. I cannot stay here. I need to get away." Eli took a slow breath, his mind racing. He was a man who had chosen a life of drifting from town to town, leaving behind the violence and strict codes of law he had once enforced. He knew danger, he knew fear, and he knew the consequences of getting involved in someone else's troubles. But there was something about this moment, about the way Kaya looked at him, that made him feel responsible. "Why me?" he asked finally, his voice low but steady. "Why now?" Kaya's eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief. "Because I have no one else. I have watched for days, hoping someone would help me, And when I saw you, something told me you could process. Eli studied her for a long moment. The market around them continued its noisy rhythm. Horses neighed, vendors called out, coins clinked. But the two of them seemed suspended in time. He noticed the way she shifted slightly, almost as if she were ready to run if he refused. Yet there was also a quiet trust in her stance. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said finally, more to himself than to her. "But you have to trust me. No tricks, no sudden moves. Can you do that?" Kaya nodded eagerly, relief flooding her features. "Yes, yes, I can." From that small exchange, a fragile plan began to form. Eli knew they could not leave openly. The market was too crowded, and there were too many eyes on them. He would need to find a way to get her out quietly, without drawing attention. Every detail mattered. When they left, where they went, how they avoided those who might follow. As they moved through the stalls, pretending to browse and gather supplies, Eli's mind raced with possibilities. He knew the terrain outside the town, rolling plains, narrow canyons, hidden trails, and he knew that survival depended on speed, stealth, and careful planning. Kaya, for her part, followed him silently, her trust growing with every step. She noticed how he watched the crowd, how he calculated each movement, and she felt a strange sense of security she had not felt in years. By mid-morning, the two had acquired what they needed: food, water, and a few essentials for travel. They had chosen a quiet street near the edge of the market, one where fewer people passed, and Eli had found a pair of saddled horses waiting in a stable he had scoped earlier. Kaya's heart raced as she mounted one of the horses, gripping the reins tightly, her senses alert for any sign of danger. Eli mounted beside her, his own horse steady and calm. He glanced at her, offering a reassuring nod. "We leave at first light tomorrow," he said, "and we keep to the hidden trails. You'll be safe with me, as long as you trust me and follow my lead." Kaya exhaled slowly, trying to calm the whirlwind of fear and hope swirling inside her. She had never trusted anyone like this before, never allowed herself to rely on someone else so completely. But in that moment, she made a choice to step into the unknown, to take a chance on freedom, and to trust a man she barely knew. The market continued its noisy life around them, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding at its edge. Children ran past, vendors shouted prices, and horses stamped impatiently in the stables. But for Kaya and Eli, the world had narrowed down to a single truth: escape was possible, and tomorrow they would begin a journey that could change both their lives forever. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the market square, Kaya allowed herself the smallest smile. It was the first real smile she had allowed herself in weeks, a flicker of hope in a life that had been marked by fear. Eli noticed it too, and for a brief moment he felt a connection he had not felt in years. Neither spoke much more that day. Words were unnecessary. The plan was clear. The trust quietly formed. And as they parted ways for the night, each went to their separate resting places, carrying the unspoken understanding that at dawn, everything could change. For Kaya, the market had been a place of danger and risk, but also of possibility. For Eli, it was a moment that reminded him that life, no matter how drifting or lonely it had become, could still hold purpose, connection, and courage. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between fear and hope, a bond had begun. A bond that would be tested, strengthened, and ultimately define the journey they were about to undertake. Tomorrow, the journey toward freedom would begin, and neither of them could know just how difficult, beautiful, and dangerous it would be. But in this moment, the seed of escape had been planted, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt real. The night had settled over the town, and the market, once full of noise and movement, was now quiet. The air was cool and still, and the only sounds came from the distant hooves of horses returning to their stables and the occasional creak of a wooden sign swinging in the wind. Kaya found a small, hidden place near the edge of the town where she could rest. Her body ached from walking. Her mind was restless with worry and hope. She tried to make sense of what had happened earlier, how she had found Eli, and how, in a moment of desperation, she had entrusted her life to a man she barely knew. Meanwhile, Eli sat outside a small abandoned shed not far from the stables. He had built a fire, the flickering flames casting shadows across his weathered face. His eyes, though tired, were alert, scanning the horizon. He had been a cowboy for many years, drifting from town to town, taking odd jobs, helping where he could, but avoiding any trouble that might tie him down. He had seen too much violence, too many lives lost over matters that did not belong to him. Yet tonight, he could not shake the feeling that helping Kaya was different. There was something urgent in her eyes, something honest, and perhaps even fated, that made him care. He thought back to his past, memories long buried under years of travel and solitude. He had once been a lawman in another town, a young man eager to do what was right, but the world had not been kind. He had seen families torn apart, friends killed, and justice ignored. Over time, he had chosen to leave that life behind, to wander instead of fight, to avoid attachments that could be broken. And yet, despite his careful avoidance of responsibility, he could not ignore Kaya's plea. Kaya lay in the shadows of an alleyway, her mind also drifting to her past. She remembered the small village where she had grown up, surrounded by family and the wide open land. Life had been hard but simple. Learning to hunt, to ride, to survive, but that world had been stolen from her. One by one, circumstances had forced her into places she did not belong, among people who judged her for her heritage and sought to control her. She had endured fear, cruelty, and loneliness, but she had never given up hope. And now, seeing Eli in the market, she felt a glimmer of possibility she had not felt in years. As the night deepened, Eli considered how to approach the escape. The town was small, but the people who sought Kaya were clever and persistent. They were not just concerned with keeping her within the town. They feared her independence, her spirit, and what she represented to those who did not understand her. Eli knew that leaving openly would be dangerous. They would need to move quietly, avoiding main roads and patrolling eyes. Every step would matter. He remembered a hidden path leading out of the town, a route he had used before when moving stolen or stray horses. It twisted through a narrow canyon, over a creek, and then opened into the rolling plains beyond. Few people ever traveled it, and it was easy to hide along the way. He made a mental map of the route, noting safe spots to rest and water sources along the journey. Kaya, sensing the weight of the moment, prepared herself as best she could. She examined the small supplies Eli had helped her gather, making sure everything was in order. A loaf of bread, a small jar of dried meat, a flask of water, and a few coins in case they needed them later. She also checked her clothing and her hair, braiding it tightly to prevent it from getting caught as they traveled. Every action she took was careful and deliberate, guided by the knowledge that their survival depended on preparation, caution, and trust in each other. Morning came slowly, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. Birds called in the distance, and the town began to wake, unaware of the quiet tension building at its edges. Eli approached Kaya, who had been waiting near the hidden alley. He nodded once, silently acknowledging her readiness. "We leave now," he said quietly. "Stay close and follow my lead." "Don't speak unless I ask you to. Can you do that?" Kaya nodded, swallowing her fear. Her heart pounded, not from the exertion, but from the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She climbed onto her horse, adjusting the reins and testing her balance. Eli followed suit, mounting his own horse and checking the path ahead. For a brief moment, they paused, exchanging a glance that spoke volumes. No words were needed. They were partners now, bound by circumstance, necessity, and the fragile trust they had begun to build. The first steps out of the town were tense. Every corner and alleyway seemed full of danger. Eli guided Kaya through narrow streets, avoiding the main square and the watchful eyes of merchants who might recognize her. They passed quietly behind buildings, slipping past stalls before the vendors had fully opened for the day. The air was thick with anticipation, each footfall bringing them closer to freedom, but also closer to discovery. Once they reached the outskirts, the landscape began to change. The wooden buildings gave way to open fields, and the dirt roads turned into winding trails that led toward the canyon. Eli's experience as a cowboy became invaluable. He knew how to move horses quietly, how to judge distances, and how to read the land for potential threats. Kaya followed his lead, learning quickly, trusting instinctively, and finding strength in the rhythm of travel. Along the way, Eli began to learn more about Kaya's life. Though she spoke sparingly, she shared pieces of her story, her childhood, the forced restrictions placed on her by people who did not understand her culture, and the moments of fear that had driven her to the market that fateful day. Each revelation deepened Eli's resolve. He realized that helping her was not just an act of kindness. It was a chance to protect someone who had been wronged by the world. For Kaya, the journey was both frightening and exhilarating. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, but every step forward also represented freedom. She had never traveled with anyone before, never depended on another person so fully. And yet she found herself drawn to Eli's steady presence, the way he moved with quiet confidence and watchfulness. In the midst of uncertainty, she began to feel something she had not felt in years: hope. The morning turned to afternoon, and the hidden path led them through the canyon. Narrow cliffs rose on either side, casting long shadows across the trail. The sound of a distant creek echoed through the rock walls, and the wind carried a sharp, clean scent of the open plains beyond. Eli encouraged Kaya to drink from the flask and eat a small piece of bread, knowing that their journey would be long and demanding. They paused only briefly, using the time to rest their horses and scan the horizon for signs of danger. Despite the challenges, there were moments of quiet connection. Kaya began to ask questions about Eli's past, not prying, but curious. She wanted to understand the man who had become her protector, the stranger she had trusted with her life. Eli in turn shared fragments of his story: his time as a lawman, the people he had lost, the reasons he had chosen a life of wandering. He spoke carefully, never revealing more than necessary, but enough to build a bond between them. As the day wore on, the shadows grew longer, and the canyon began to open into a stretch of plains. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the fields. Eli guided Kaya to a small grove of trees, a hidden spot he had used before for shelter. They rested here for the night, feeding and watering the horses and sharing what little food remained. Kaya felt a deep sense of relief. Though their journey was far from over, she was no longer under immediate threat. That night, as the stars appeared in the clear sky above, Kaya and Eli sat near the fire. The crackling flames provided warmth and light, and the silence of the plains wrapped around them. Kaya spoke softly, recounting memories of her childhood, the lessons she had learned from her family, and the skills that had kept her alive through years of danger. Eli listened, offering advice and guidance, and occasionally sharing stories of his own adventures. In that quiet moment, a fragile trust solidified into a deeper understanding. They were not merely traveling together. They were becoming companions in a world that had offered little kindness. Each had their own burdens, their own fears, but together, they could face the challenges that lay ahead. As sleep finally overtook them, Kaya felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft breathing of the horses nearby. Eli kept watch, vigilant and alert, ensuring that the night passed without incident. For both of them, the journey had only just begun, but for the first time in a long while, hope had taken root. Tomorrow, they would face new challenges: hunters, wild terrain, and the unknown that stretched before them. But tonight, they rested in the knowledge that they were not alone, that trust had been earned, and that together, they could navigate the dangerous path toward freedom. And so, under the vast expanse of the starlit sky, two lives intertwined by chance and courage prepared for the journey that would change them both forever. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The plains were quiet, with only the sound of the wind moving through the tall grasses and the distant calls of birds. Kaya and Eli woke early, as they always had to, aware that danger could come at any moment. They fed their horses, drank from their flasks, and prepared for the journey ahead. Every movement was careful, precise, as if even the smallest mistake could put them at risk. Eli studied the path ahead, The hidden trail they had chosen wound through uneven ground, dense trees, and occasional rocky ridges. It was perfect for keeping out of sight of anyone in town who might follow them, but it was not without its challenges. He turned to Kaya, speaking in a calm, firm voice. "We travel carefully today. Keep your eyes and ears open. We don't know who might be watching, and we have to be ready for anything." Kaya nodded, gripping the reins tightly. Her mind was alert, every sense sharpened by the tension of their flight. She had trusted Eli with her life, and so far he had not let her down. But the world beyond the town was uncertain, and she knew that every step forward would be a test of both courage and endurance. As they moved through the narrow trails, Eli taught Kaya small survival skills. He showed her how to read the tracks left by animals, how to tell if a path had been recently traveled by humans, and how to move silently without disturbing the environment. Kaya listened carefully, absorbing every detail. Though she had grown up in the wilderness, Eli's knowledge added a new layer of understanding. Knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death. Hours passed as they rode through the trails, their horses stepping carefully over roots and rocks. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to press down on them. Eli guided Kaya to a small stream where they could rest and refresh themselves. The water was cool and clear, a welcome relief from the harsh sun and dry terrain. They allowed the horses to drink and graze while they themselves ate a small portion of the food they had brought. Kaya took the moment of calm to speak. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "You don't even know me." Eli paused, considering the question carefully. He had asked himself the same thing countless times since they had left the town. "I've seen too many people suffer," he said finally. "Too many lives destroyed by cruelty or fear. When I saw you yesterday, I knew you were in danger. And I couldn't walk away. I don't always get involved, but sometimes you just know when it's right to act." Kaya listened, feeling a deep respect for the man beside her. He was quiet, steady, and calm, yet she could sense the strength beneath his surface. His past, his experiences had made him cautious, but they had also given him a sense of fairness, of justice. She realized that she could trust him, not just because he promised safety, but because his actions already proved it. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully, but tension never fully lifted. Eli kept scanning the trail ahead and behind, knowing that the hunters would be persistent. They had no way of knowing exactly how many people might come after Kaya, but they could assume the worst. Every sound of snapping twigs, distant voices, or unexpected movement made their hearts race. By afternoon, the trail led them to a dense forest. The trees were tall and thick, their leaves forming a canopy that blocked much of the sunlight. Eli guided Kaya carefully, teaching her how to use the shadows to hide from potential pursuers. He showed her how to tie small branches to the ground to make it seem as though the trail was less traveled, and how to listen for signs of people or animals moving nearby. Kaya followed his instructions, quickly learning the skills that would help them survive. They were several miles into the forest when they heard it, a faint rustling that didn't belong to the wind or wildlife. Eli's hand went to the hilt of his knife, and he signaled for Kaya to stay quiet. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound came again, closer this time, and she could make out the faint crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. Eli whispered, "Hide behind that tree and stay low. Don't make a sound." Kaya obeyed immediately, pressing herself against the rough bark of a large oak. Her breathing was shallow and her eyes were wide as she watched Eli step forward, moving silently through the underbrush. A group of men appeared ahead, their hats low over their eyes and hands resting on the hilts of knives or pistols. They had been searching for Kaya, no doubt, and they were closing in. Eli stayed out of sight, observing their movements carefully. He waited until the hunters passed the spot where Kaya was hiding before motioning for her to follow him silently. They moved deeper into the forest, putting distance between themselves and the men, and finally paused in a small clearing where the trees were thick enough to hide them completely. Kaya exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. "That was too close," she whispered. Eli nodded. "It's not over yet." They'll keep looking. Now we have to stay ahead. We travel fast, but carefully. No mistakes. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the forest. Eli decided they needed to find a safe place to rest for the night. He led Kaya to a small cave tucked into the side of a rocky hill. It was hidden from view and offered enough space for them and the horses to rest. Inside, they gathered some dry leaves and branches to make a comfortable sleeping area. Eli started a small fire, careful to keep it low so the smoke wouldn't draw attention. As the fire crackled, Kaya finally allowed herself to relax a little. She looked at Eli, admiration and gratitude shining in her eyes. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said softly. Eli shook his head. "You're stronger than you think. You've survived a lot, and you'll keep surviving. I'm just here to help." They ate a small meal of bread and dried meat, the firelight dancing across their faces. The conversation turned to stories of their past. Eli spoke of the towns he had visited, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. Kaya shared memories of her family, her village, and the lessons her elders had taught her about the land, the animals, and survival. Each story brought them closer together, building trust and understanding. As night fell, the forest became a world of shadows and whispers. The sounds of nocturnal animals filled the air, and the temperature dropped sharply. Kaya huddled close to Eli, feeling the warmth of the fire and the steady presence of the man who had become her protector. For the first time in a long while she felt safe, though she knew the danger was far from over. Eli kept watch through the night, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. He thought about the journey ahead, the challenges of the forest, the plains beyond, and the hunters who would not give up easily. He knew that every step mattered, every decision could mean life or death, and that Kaya's safety depended on both of them. By the time the first light of dawn touched the forest, they were ready to move again. The night had passed without incident, but Eli knew they could not linger. The hidden trails would only take them so far before the terrain opened to areas where they could be spotted. They needed to continue, to keep moving, and to rely on every skill they had learned to stay ahead of those who hunted them.
Kaya mounted her horse, feeling a mixture of fear and determination.
She had come far from the town market, far from the life that had threatened to trap her, and she was learning to trust her own strength as well as Eli's guidance. Eli climbed onto his horse beside her, scanning the path ahead. Together they rode out of the forest and into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The day stretched before them, filled with danger, beauty, and uncertainty. Each mile they traveled was a test of endurance, courage, and trust. And though they did not yet know what lay at the end of the trail, they knew one thing with certainty. They were no longer alone, and together they could face the trials of the wild, the hunters, and the harshness of the world beyond the town. And so, Eli and Kaya pressed on, moving deeper into the wilderness, their hearts steady, their minds alert, and their bond growing stronger with every step. The journey was only beginning, but the courage, trust, and determination they carried would guide them through the challenges yet to come. The sun had risen high, pouring golden light over the rolling hills and sparse forests. Eli and Kaya rode steadily, their horses moving carefully along the narrow trail that wound through the plains. The air was warm, and the faint scent of wildflowers mingled with the dry dust of the path. For a moment the world seemed calm, almost peaceful. But both of them knew better. Danger was never far behind. The hunters who pursued Kaya were relentless. They had already passed through the town searching for her, and though Eli had led her away quickly, he knew they would not give up easily. He scanned the horizon constantly, noting every shadow, every movement in the grass, every break in the trees. "Keep your head down and your eyes open," he warned. They could be anywhere. Kaya nodded, gripping the reins tightly. The tension in her body was constant, a reminder that their journey was not just a test of skill but a battle for survival. She had never traveled so far or faced such uncertainty, but she had learned quickly from Eli. She watched his every move, listened to his instructions, and began to develop her own sense of awareness. Each lesson he taught her, Each careful decision gave her confidence and strength. By midday, the trail led them into a narrow canyon. The walls of stone rose high on either side, casting long shadows that made the air cooler and the path darker. Eli urged the horses forward slowly, careful not to make noise. The canyon was perfect for hiding, but dangerous as well. One wrong move could send a horse stumbling or expose them to anyone following from above. Kaya's heart raced as they moved through the twisting paths. She had never seen such rugged beauty before. The way the sunlight hit the rocks, the tiny plants growing in impossible places, the echo of birds calling from the cliffs above. Even in the midst of fear, there was a strange sense of wonder. Eli noticed the awe in her eyes but kept his attention on the trail, his instincts telling him that caution was still the priority. Suddenly, a sound from above made both of them freeze. The snap of a branch echoed down the canyon, and Kaya instinctively ducked closer to her horse. Eli raised a hand, signaling her to stay still. He strained his ears, listening carefully. A small group of men had appeared on the rim of the canyon, looking down at the trail. They were the hunters, their eyes sharp and their weapons ready. Eli whispered urgently, "We move now, but stay low. Follow my lead." They guided their horses along the narrow edges, hugging the canyon walls where shadows would hide them. Every step was slow and deliberate. Kaya's hands trembled slightly, but she held on, trusting Eli completely. The men above had not yet spotted them, and Eli used every ounce of skill he had learned from years of tracking and surviving in the wilderness. Finally, they reached a small ledge where the canyon opened into a clearing. Eli led Kaya down carefully, and they moved quietly through the underbrush, leaving the canyon and the hunters behind, for now. Kaya's heart was still racing, but she felt a surge of pride. They had evaded danger together, and every successful escape strengthened their bond. As they moved into the open plains, the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the golden grass. The landscape was wide and free, yet unforgiving. The wind carried the scent of distant water, and Eli guided them toward a small creek he knew would provide them with water and a place to rest. The journey was exhausting, but they pressed on, determined to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the town. By late afternoon, they reached the creek. The water flowed clear and cool, and both horses drank eagerly. Kaya knelt at the edge, cupping her hands to drink and splashing some water on her face. The relief was immense. Though they were still being pursued, this small reprieve gave them energy and hope.
Eli watched her carefully, noticing the slight smile on her face, and he allowed himself a small sense of satisfaction.
She was learning to endure, to survive, and to trust him completely. After a brief rest, they set up a small camp near the creek. Eli gathered dry branches for a fire, careful to keep the smoke low and controlled. Kaya helped, collecting small twigs and leaves to add to the pile. As the fire crackled, casting warm light across the clearing, they shared a small meal. Bread, dried meat, and a few berries they had picked along the way. It was simple, but sustaining, and they ate in silence for a while, letting the comfort of food and warmth settle over them. Once the meal was finished, Kaya looked at Eli with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "I've never traveled like this," she admitted softly. "I've always been careful, always hiding, always alone. But with you, it feels different. Safer, stronger." Eli nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're stronger than you know," he said. "I'm just here to guide you. You're learning fast, and every step you take on your own counts. You don't have to rely on me forever, but for now, we watch each other's backs." The night was quiet, but the wilderness had its own dangers. Small animals scurried through the underbrush, and distant howls reminded them that predators were never far. Eli kept watch, listening for any signs of the hunters or other threats. Kaya slept lightly, her mind alert even in rest. Despite the exhaustion, both felt the thrill of freedom, the knowledge that they were moving forward, escaping the confinement and fear of the town, and embracing the vast, unpredictable world outside. The next morning, they continued their journey. The plains stretched endlessly, golden waves of grass rolling to the horizon. The wind was strong, carrying dust and scents that both masked their trail and challenged their endurance. Eli guided Kaya through hidden paths, teaching her to notice changes in the terrain, subtle tracks, and signs of anyone who might be following them. Each lesson was vital, and Kaya absorbed them quickly, her confidence growing with each passing hour. As they traveled, they faced new challenges. A sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds covering the sky and a heavy rain drenching the plains. The horses struggled through mud and slippery grass, and Kaya clung tightly, trusting Eli to guide her through. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder rolled through the hills. It was a test of skill, patience, and courage, but together they navigated the storm. The rain soaked them, but it also washed away their tracks, helping them remain hidden from any pursuers. When the storm passed, the sun broke through, and a rainbow arched across the sky. Kaya laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign and joyful after so many days of fear. Eli smiled too, recognizing the small victories that made their journey meaningful. They were learning, surviving, and growing together step by step. The days continued, filled with both danger and beauty. They crossed rivers, climbed rocky ridges, and moved through forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. Every obstacle was a lesson, every moment a test of endurance. Kaya's skills improved daily, tracking, riding, and reading the land. Eli watched her with pride, recognizing that she was becoming capable, resourceful, and resilient. Through it all, their bond deepened. Words were not always necessary. A glance, a gesture, a shared understanding spoke volumes. Kaya learned to trust Eli completely, and Eli learned to respect her courage and intuition. They were no longer just traveling companions. They were partners, facing the wild and its dangers together. One evening, as they made camp on a small hill overlooking a valley, Kaya spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I would see this land, free and wide, without fear holding me down. It's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. I'm scared." Eli nodded, understanding completely. "Fear is part of this life," he said. "But courage is what keeps you moving forward. You have more courage than you realize, Kaya. You've survived more than most people could imagine. And now, we face it together." As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and orange, they sat quietly by their fire. The wild stretched out around them, vast, untamed, and full of challenges yet to come. But in that moment, they had each other, trust, and the knowledge that they could face the wilderness and any threat together. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Kaya felt a sense of hope that was not fleeting. She had escaped the town, evaded the hunters, and found a companion in Eli who would not abandon her. The world was wide, full of danger and beauty, and the road ahead would test them both. But together they were stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon. And so, under the fading light of a crimson sky, two lives intertwined by necessity and courage prepared to continue their journey. The chase would not end easily. The dangers of the wild were ever present, and yet, in the heart of the wilderness they had found trust, strength, and the beginnings of something lasting beyond fear. The first light of dawn spread slowly across the plains, painting the horizon in soft shades of pink and gold. Eli and Kaya stirred from their camp, their bodies stiff but alert. The night had passed without incident, and for the first time in many days, the world felt calm, though both knew that calm was only temporary. They had come far, but the journey was not yet over. Eli mounted his horse and turned to Kaya. "Today we push toward the settlement I told you about," he said. "It's remote, far from the town and the people who would harm you. You'll be safe there. But we have to keep moving. There's no stopping now." Kaya nodded, the weight of anticipation and relief pressing on her chest. She had survived the town, the canyon, the forest, and the plains. She had faced storms, hunger, fear, and relentless hunters. And now the thought of reaching a place where she could finally breathe freely gave her courage she had not known she possessed. As they rode, Eli kept his senses sharp, scanning the plains for any sign of movement. They moved quietly, the horses' hooves barely making a sound on the soft earth. The wind shifted, carrying scents and sounds that could signal danger or safety. Kaya had learned well from Eli, noticing subtle details in the landscape. Fresh tracks of deer, broken twigs that suggested people might have passed recently, and the distant call of birds that could warn of predators nearby. By midday, the terrain began to change. The rolling plains gave way to gentle hills, dotted with small trees and patches of wildflowers. A narrow river glimmered in the distance, and beyond it a line of low hills marked the approach to the settlement. Eli guided Kaya carefully, choosing paths that kept them hidden while bringing them closer to their destination. The sense of freedom was almost overwhelming. Kaya felt the wind on her face, the warmth of the sun on her back, and the sound of water in the river below. It was a world so different from the crowded town she had fled, a place where she could imagine a life without fear. Yet, she also knew that reaching it would not be simple. The hunters could still be following, and the journey required vigilance, endurance, and trust in Eli. As the afternoon approached, they reached a narrow pass between two hills. Eli signaled for Kaya to stop and pointed ahead. "The pass narrows here," he said. "We need to be careful. One wrong step, and we could be seen or trapped. Follow me closely." Kaya's heart pounded, but she trusted him completely. They moved slowly through the pass, keeping low and using the shadows of rocks and trees for cover. The sound of the river below was comforting, and she could see the settlement in the distance just beyond the hills. The closer they got, the stronger her hope became. Suddenly a faint noise reached their ears, the crunch of footsteps on dry earth. Eli froze, holding up a hand. He scanned the area, and his eyes narrowed. "Hunters," he whispered. "They've caught up." Kaya felt a rush of fear, but Eli's calm presence steadied her. "We move quietly and quickly," he instructed. "We cannot let them see us until we reach the cover near the river." Together they guided their horses through a hidden trail that Eli had spotted earlier. It wound along the side of the hills, concealed by bushes and small trees. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and silent. Kaya followed his lead, heart racing, muscles tense, yet she felt a strange exhilaration. They had faced danger before, and together they had always found a way to survive. The hunters were close, their voices faint but carrying over the plain. Eli signaled Kaya to dismount and led her to a thicket near the riverbank. The horses were hidden in a small grove, tethered to low branches. Eli whispered, "Stay here. Watch the river. I'll draw their attention if they come too close." Kaya nodded, fear and determination mingling in her chest. She watched as Eli moved toward the open plain, visible but cautious, drawing the hunters' eyes and leading them away from the river and the horses. It was a dangerous risk, but Eli was skilled, and Kaya trusted him completely. The hunters pursued, calling out and moving through the plain. Eli led them in a careful arc, keeping them focused on him while staying out of easy reach. His knowledge of the land and his quick thinking allowed him to stay ahead, and soon he returned to Kaya, signaling that the immediate threat had passed. Together they mounted their horses and rode the final stretch to the settlement. The low hills gave way to a small village nestled along the river, its wooden homes and fences blending into the landscape. Children played near the water, women tended gardens, and men worked quietly in the fields. It was a peaceful, welcoming place, far from the dangers they had left behind. As they entered the settlement, Kaya's heart swelled with relief. She had never imagined such safety existed, a place where she could finally breathe without fear. Eli guided her to the edge of the village, where a small cabin stood isolated but secure. The door opened to reveal a kind-faced woman who welcomed them warmly. "You're safe now," she said, her voice gentle. "You can rest here, and no one will harm you." Kaya dismounted, tears welling in her eyes. She had journeyed through fear, danger, and uncertainty, and now, for the first time, she felt free. Eli watched her, a quiet satisfaction in his expression. She had trusted him, learned from him, and survived alongside him. And now she could begin a new life, The days that followed were filled with quiet healing. Kaya rested, tending to minor cuts and bruises from the journey, and slowly reacquainted herself with the idea of safety. She explored the settlement, meeting the people who would become her neighbors and friends. Every smile, every gesture of kindness reinforced the sense of peace she had longed for. Eli, too, found a sense of fulfillment. He had spent years drifting, avoiding attachments and hiding from the past. But helping Kaya had given him purpose again. He realized that protecting someone, guiding someone to safety, and witnessing hope restored was a reward unlike any other. He stayed nearby, ensuring that she settled in comfortably, but also allowing her the independence she had longed for. One evening, as the sun set over the river, Kaya and Eli sat together by the water. The sky was painted in brilliant hues of orange and pink, reflecting in the gentle flow of the river. Kaya spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I would see this place. I never thought I would be free." Eli nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "You earned it," he said. "You survived everything that was thrown at you. You trusted yourself and trusted me. Now you can build a life that belongs to you." Kaya smiled, a deep, genuine smile that had been missing for so long. She realized that the journey had changed her, strengthened her, and taught her the true meaning of courage and trust. And Eli, watching her, felt the quiet joy of knowing that he had made a difference, not just in her life, but in the course of his own. The settlement became their refuge. Kaya began to help with daily tasks, learning the routines of the community, while Eli continued to guide her when needed, always nearby but never controlling. They were equals now, companions bound by the trials they had faced together, and slowly the fear that had haunted Kaya for years began to fade, replaced by confidence, hope, and the knowledge that she could survive and thrive in a world that once seemed cruel and unforgiving. Seasons changed, and the bond between Eli and Kaya deepened. They shared stories by the fire, laughed at small adventures, and supported each other through challenges. Though they never forgot the dangers they had faced, the memory of their journey became a source of strength and resilience. They had escaped the town, evaded the hunters, and survived the wild together. And in doing so, they discovered something far greater than survival. They discovered trust, courage, and the beginnings of a new life. One bright morning, Kaya stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the plain she had once feared. The wind carried the scent of freedom and possibility. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the steady presence of Eli beside her. For the first time in her life, she knew she could live without fear, without hiding, and without limits. Eli looked at her and smiled. "It's a new beginning," he said. "One you've earned." Kaya nodded, tears in her eyes but a smile on her lips. "And one I'm ready for," she replied. Together, they turned back toward the settlement, toward safety, community, and a life that was truly their own. The journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but it had also been transformative. They had faced the wild, the hunters, and their own fears, and emerged stronger, braver, and united. In the quiet peace of the settlement, under the vast expanse of sky and the gentle flow of the river, Kaya and Eli began a life defined not by fear, but by freedom, trust, and hope. They had survived together, and in doing so, they had discovered the true meaning of courage and companionship. The world was wide, unpredictable, and sometimes harsh, but for the first time, both Kaya and Eli knew that they could face it together. And that knowledge, more than anything, was the beginning of everything they had dreamed of: safety, trust, and the chance to truly live.